Hi, I have no real intention of making product reviews, but I recently stumbled upon a product that caught my attention, and as far as I can tell, as strange as it might seem, there seems to be no real coverage of it here on YouTube. The product here is the Instar Paint Alpha Range Primaries, which I really think deserves some attention. Therefore, I will provide you with some thoughts if you're the next person who considers picking these up. So, what do I find interesting about these colors? It's this. You've probably seen stuff like this before, but I promise you this will not be yet another video about color theory. It is, however, quite central to this review, and we will touch on it quite a lot. So if you do feel that this is something unfamiliar, there are plenty of people who both know more about it and are better at explaining it, so just pause the video and search for color theory, and you will have a new world to discover. But even when you do know about color wheels, this might not look the world to you. It is just a regular circular color wheel. The bigger thing about this color wheel is not visible once it's dry, but rather how it was created. I created it mixing the basic colors blue, yellow and magenta. The patches of these three colors are just a drop smeared out in their appropriate position. Right between each of them there is a spot of paint, which have been created mixing 50-50, one drop of each. And between them and the pure paints there are colors mixed with 2 drops of the neighboring pure color and 1 drop of the further one. And it's in these mixes we find the key to why I'm impressed. You might still be a bit confused. I just presented a regular color wheel and the theoretical way to produce one. And the result also looks just like what you expect. But just compare it to the color wheels produced in exactly the same way using pure chimera colors. Or this one, using Abteiling 502 colors. They're both well-renowned colors that I like, but when mixing a color wheel in exactly the same way, you can clearly tell how one of the basic colors is always very dominant. And this is the basis for all the things I like about these colors. They're made to mix. Before we move on, I will mention that running in the background you will see a live usage of these colors, creating an M90 camouflage, as described in a previous video. Keep in mind that I make no claims to be any expert painter, and any bad application is more likely to be down to me rather than the paint. And no, so far nobody's bothered to send me the paints for free. So back to the colors. Why would I care for mixed ready paints? When I did my 1000 Suns conversion half a year ago, I had a limit on what colors I could use. And as a loophole, I mixed green from yellow and blue. I was surprised how easy it was, and it also happened to coincide with a strong urge to reduce my hobby footprint. I really try to limit myself, but as of many of you probably have experienced, the number of hobby related things in the house always tend to grow anyway. And then it struck me. At least in theory, all colors I ever will need are the 3 basic colors together with black and white to adjust the brightness. You see, I realized that even when I do grab the very specific colors available, I almost never apply them without some degree of mixing. Why not just go all the way? It was a bit daunting, but the promise of 5 bottles to rule them all was just too great. Hailing from a background including computer colors, I naturally started out by getting it all wrong, trying to mix red, green and blue. Here we need CMYK colors, not RGB. That's for computers. If you do decide to walk the same path, make sure to read up on this because it really helps a lot. Slightly burned, I regrouped and realized that I'm probably not the first one to have this thought. And that is true. I somehow stumbled on the Instar paints when looking for a pure magenta. And when I read about the box of primers, I got really excited. Their site might unfortunately be annoyingly slow, But the producer did not only provide a convenient box of all the needed colors, but also a treasure of resources on how to approach this very idea of using only basic colors. Like color charts and wheels describing what color mixing 3 drops of X and 7 drops of Y and then finally 5 drops of white will result in. There's also a wide selection of pretty exact recipes, and this is where the title of this video originates. Mixed using RGB on different screens with varying settings, the result will rarely give you the exact color, but I still find them very useful. The way I do it is to look at the recipe, like this 5011 steel blue, and try to boil it down to roughly 5 drops. In this case it would probably be 4 drops of blue, 1 drop of red. That might just be good enough. When I paint, it's not the exact color that stops me from receiving a golden demon. Most often I start out like this and then adjust by how it turns out in real life. A drop of yellow if it needs to be warmer, or a dash of black if it's too bright. And even though the balance between the primers is very well adjusted, I must mention that the trouble of black being very dominant unfortunately exists here as well. Then when I do find the color I like, I just make a small mark in my notebook and write the recipe for future reference. One thing you might notice is that I referenced using red, which is not one of the primers, and this could be a good time to bring up reality. Even though all my previous colors are now stashed away in a box, sort of out of reach, there are not only 5 bottles in my rack. I have 12. Why? At least when looking in real life, you can tell that the spot between yellow and magenta might look quite red, but it's not as pure and vibrant as one might hope for. Therefore I decided to take the easy way out and just buy one. And there are also the Oxide colors yellow, red and black, which I just wanted to try out, but they got to stay because Oxide yellow and red just makes mixing skin tones so easy, and the Oxide black is really useful as it's not quite as dominant as the pure black, and thus partially mitigates that problem mentioned earlier. The next two are the auxiliary products Water Plus and Extender, and I find some of the auxiliary products almost as exciting as the colors. They promise that these colors and auxiliaries together with varnish and metal medium is all that you will ever need. It could very well be true, but I have no issues with my regular Vallejo varnish, and until I run out I will not change that one. The metal medium is the only product that I actually tried and put back in the box. It certainly isn't worse than any other metal medium that I tried, but once you tried Vallejo metal silver, all other metallics feel kind of lacking, and I see no reason to abandon that one. The Water Plus and Extender, however, will probably stay even if I would abandon the Instar paints. The Extender impressed me, and it really adds a long drying time. I have not really used it a lot, and I usually just, take it away as soon as I'm finished, but as I recall, it's good half an hour or something, staying wet. And it also adds a slight hint of oil color actually. Using these colors, it's actually very useful to have the Extender because they normally dry really fast. You can do wet blending without, but you actually have to be even quicker than usual. Speaking of the drying time, it's normally a very convenient thing, as you pretty much never have to think about drying wet colors. Even when painting just one miniature, you can paint all of one color and then immediately go back and top it up in any lacking areas. And that must be said. These colors often have to be reinforced once, but with a short drying time it's rarely a problem. And given that it's a trade-off between getting the mixing properties right and the coverage, I'm here for the mixing, so it doesn't really bother me. And then there is the Water Plus. It does work pretty much like they advertise it, in the sense that if you add 1 drop you get contrast paint, 2 to make a wash, and 3rd for a filter. However, I'm not sure if it's just better at it than a regular Vallejo flow improver, but even if it's just slightly better or even equal, it's a solid product, and it also comes in a well-suited dropper bottles, the All Share. The bottles They are really nice. The long thin neck makes it easy to produce the small well-defined drops that really help you along, especially when mixing small batches of color. The double good thing about them is that they're also sold separately. After trying these colors out in my first project, I immediately went back to buy separate bottles that then, I, among other things, used to bring that awesome handling to my old colors as well. It also brings us to the last bottle. It is a 10 white to 1 black ready mixture. Using this approach of mixing all colors from the primaries, there will be a lot of mixing. And it's not something that bothers me because, as stated, with the handed bottle it's really quick and easy. But I paint miniatures for Kill Team, which means that I rarely paint more than 8 to 10 models at a time. If I want to make a bright desaturated red for just the highlight of, let's say weapons, it will be an utter waste of paint to mix 1 black and 10 white, to then add 11 drops of red to make a 50 fixture mixture of red. When I used it for my Phobos Marines, I put 3 major colors in bottles until the project was done. Then they were emptied, because the whole point is not to have buckets of paint lying around the room, And so far this light gray is the only one that keeps repairing often enough to become permanent. I suppose there will be more of them, like, off-white down the line. But the nice thing is that you don't have to buy them up front and see who stays. You can just mix, and whatever you use, you just keep those ones. And that will have to make do for another crusty transition here. Another good thing about all the bottles is how transparent they are. That, coupled with the reasonably sized labels, means that you have no troubles actually viewing the color inside. Not that it really matters when it comes to the primaries, because I don't have that many, and their names are really descriptive, like yellow, magenta, and black. It's kind of refreshing not to have to remember if the nice earthy color was the zombie droppings in a graveyard, or was it the worn wizard undies. As mentioned earlier, there are very specific colors available for mixing if you really feel you have the need for that, but in that case, you just buy those colors instead. But I do have to return to these, because as mentioned earlier, and as the producers also mentioned themselves, it is very hard to preserve the look of the color on the screen from the physical color. They do offer prepared sheets where you can mix along and create your own reference palette, but here I have my only real wish, and that is that the box of primers would ship with a verified accurate print of the 2 main color wheels available. Just, to help people get a flying start. Because they also claim that there are 32,000 colors available, which could be kind of daunting. And it's totally true, depending on how you see it. You could just as well say there are infinitely many colors available. I suppose those 32,000 comes from, all the available combinations when mixing 10 drops, like all of the main recipes are. But you could pretty much fivefold that one if you just added a 11th drop. But you probably would not be able to see the difference, and therefore I stick to the roughly 3,000 colors available from the previously mentioned 5 bits. The final subject will be the ready to paint formula. The producers do mention that it might feel a bit strange at first, and yes, certainly it does. At least I was not prepared to pour thin paint straight out of the bottle. In general, this is not a problem, and it sure is a short step from bottle opening to the paint heating the miniature. There is, however, one thing about it that I had found annoying, and that's dry brushing. I might get it wrong, but it feels like you first soak up a lot of paint because it flows well. Then you wipe it off until it's all gone, because it flows so well that if any paint is left, it will gather and flow into any recesses. The problem is that when you wipe off all the paint, the pigment flow is so good that there's actually no color left in a brush. Or very little. So the whole dry brushing is a very fine balance between, getting some actual color in there and not get it to pool into the recesses, which is annoying. With all the good auxiliaries available, they would perhaps have been more useful if they started off a bit more dense, And then the water plus ladder would instead be no drops, dry brush, 1 drop, paint, 2 drops, contrast, 3 drops, wash, 4 drops, filter. But with only 12 bottles in my rack, I have the space to keep a few dry brush colors around. You know, time will tell. What I do know is that for me the concept of the primers is here to stay. And if that's not your thing, the auxiliaries in general, and the bottles in particular, are worth checking out by themselves. This video became quite a bit more than I initially intended to, and I will give a short concluding list of pros and cons, but if anyone could get someone like, you know, Vince to look at these, it would make me very happy. I do like them, but for all I know, I might just be using them wrong and miss out on a lot of potential. So, to conclude, on the plus side, they're ready to mix. They have a fast drying time. They have a great flow improver. They have great bottles. And they're doing their unique thing. On the other hand, they are hard to dry brush. They have a fast drying time and a weakish coverage. That's it. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy your hobby.